Independence, India and Pakistan go to war. This is what we have all learned in all our history classes when somebody asks about the partition of India. But it is not the full story. India's map changed much more than we thought, and it actually became what we now know as India and Pakistan today in 1975. And colonialism in India itself ended in 1961. How can this be? And how is Kashmir not the only thing? My video aims to not talk about Kashmir. I am literally talking about everything but Kashmir. Because there are other places in which the border between Pakistan and India were made, and the only reason we talk about Kashmir a lot is because it is known as the most lethal part of the conflict. Without further ado, let's begin. Now, when India and Pakistan actually gained their independence, they actually looked much different. India was actually quite different. It was this very scary patchwork of different countries. So, in the orange, we can see what India's land was. In the green, you can see what Pakistan's land was, and everything else in between are princely states. You see, when the British Raj was made, it was made as a solution for independence, which obviously did not last. Essentially, the dark red parts would be actual British India that the British fully controlled. If you were here, you were completely under British jurisdiction. However, you also had the princely states. They were British vassals, but did have their kind of independence of some sorts. There were more than 600, making the Holy Roman Empire looked like its borders were carefully studied, and that rarely happens. These princely states all fought together as one country in World War II as British India, along with British India itself. Anyway, what happened was when these two countries gained independence, they were first as kingdoms, monarchies, like Canada is today, for example. Canada is a dominion of the Commonwealth, along with the UK and Australia. All these countries and quite a lot more have the same king as their head of state, King Charles III, or at that time, King George IV, or 6th, I forgot. Anyway, what happened was they had their own prime ministers, but they also had the king as a ceremonial item. So India and Pakistan, when they gained independence at first, they were also dominions. Although India quickly tried to transition to a republic, Pakistan doing it much later. Anyway, these princely states, well, since nobody wants a patchwork of states in the middle of them, they were allowed to join any of these countries, whether India or Pakistan. Keep in mind, India is the Hindu majority part of the place. Pakistan is the, well, other majority, Muslim. Another choice these princely states had was to just be independent, but most of them used common sense and joined one of the sides. How did this partition happen? Well, it was Punjab and Bengal. These two provinces were just cut based on their distribution of Muslim and Hindu people, although half the time they were just scattered around the entire place. This made a mass exodus in which people wanted to transition to the other country. Many people died along the way. This is the birthplace of the rivalry between India and Pakistan, as each blamed the other that they were responsible for the bleeding exodus. I'm done yapping all about that. We can now talk about the timeline. Our timeline starts in 1947. I did research this pretty fast, so there are probably at least some mistakes in here. So if you find any mistakes, please correct me. So eventually, princely states started submitting to other rules, like very, very easily, essentially. Anyway, in the dark gray, we can see all the princely states that did not actually join any country and decided to remain independent. Kalat, I did not actually know the reason why they stayed independent. Let me find out. Because of its different historical background. Well, that's kind of true. Anyway, first let's talk about Kalat. Kalat was interesting. There's not really much to say about it other than there was a large conflict inside Pakistan that could maybe be considered the first Pakistani civil war, but not. Which basically in 1948 resulted in Kalat joining Pakistan. I'm not going to show it on the map because it's a very confusing topic for me, so I will just tell you that it ended in 1948 officially, but it will not be shown. So you may have noticed something weird. If you have been learning about the Indian partition, you thought Bangladesh was part of Pakistan at first. Not this weird area in Gujarat. What's up with that? Well, it was majority Hindu. However, the leader was Muslim. This was Junagadh, for short, Junagadh. So the Muslim leader decided to join Pakistan, and Pakistan accepted. This would actually be considered the first actual war between India and Pakistan. So first, a few different princely states came out of Junagadh because they naturally wanted to join India or Hindustan. Anyway, how do I explain this? They kind of were violently taken over by Junagadh, and then this convinced India to turn this into an excuse to annex it. Also because everybody wanted it to annex it. So the Indian army just came and stormed the area. Also, with the help of an entire protest group, this protest group turned into an army that quickly took over the entire country. The Muslim leader fled to Pakistan, and the Indians were allowed to occupy the region. It was occupied until 1948 when a vote was held in which basically everyone decided to join India. Then there was Bengal. Now, Bengal was pretty much in an awkward shape. Now, Pakistan might have been willing to have two parts of its territory away from each other. After all, they did want Junagadh. Awkward. But India sure wasn't. India wanted some land to connect its two parts. Well, islands aren't included because, well, they're islands. Nobody is going to build an entire land bridge to connect them. Although, what if they were? Anyway, a massive exodus was happening along India and Pakistan. And it was kind of very awkward for a middle thing to take part. As this was a much less distance between East Pakistan and West Pakistan than it was for East India and West India. West India sounds like the other parts, like the Caribbean. Anyway, so many Hindus just started staying in the middle because it's like easier. So Pakistan made a deal. India would get the Chicken Corridor, a strip of land that would connect both its areas, while in return, Bangladesh, which was part of Pakistan at the time, would get a tiny bit of land that was already Muslim to begin with, even though the exodus already happened, so So this was the new border. More had to happen. And that's Kashmir. Now, once again, this video is not about Kashmir. It is about this entire video is about everything except Kashmir in India and Pakistan's history after British India. So I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I will give you a quick summary of what happened if you do not know what happened. So Kashmir wanted to become independent. It was majority Muslim and Buddhist. So it wanted to act as a buffer state between the two places, as they could already see that this would be very problematic. However, Pakistan did not care and brought their tanks in. Just a quick reminder, I am not supporting either side of the case. I am going to remain neutral and show the lines of control as well as each country's claims, but not what I think is true. I will continue to be neutral. Anyway, the Hindu leader, as Hindu is Hindu, joined India out of being scared and also saying it would offer protection. So Pakistan just decided to get inside India instead, and then the whole Kashmir conflict happened. Yeah. Now you might have been noticing this big, gigantic princely state in the middle of India. This is Hyderabad, which I have seen a ton of people that are from other countries often annoyingly pronounce Hyderabad. It is not Hyderabad. Anyway, India in 1948 got there. Ding, 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 and went inside. Why? Well, communism. That's why. A communist uprising was happening in Hyderabad. And India didn't really like a country in the middle of its borders and kept thinking, oh my god, this thing could have been a big landing for India. So musting having. In other words, they wanted land. And this communist uprising proved as a useful excuse, and it would also be useful to annex it before the USSR funded it. So they annexed it in a mere 6 hours, actually. Next, we had colonies. Now, remember at the beginning of the video when I said that India's colonial period wouldn't end until 1961? I was not kidding, because India's colonial period can be defined as when India had colonies in it. And although the British colonies were gone, there were some colonies that remained, like the French and Portuguese colonies. Now, here come the French colonies. India and France were natural friends from the beginning. When the British first stepped on the continent, India and France naturally became friends over their hatred of the UK. Like the saying goes, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So France kindly gave most of their land to India. And later, the final treaty in 1952 was signed, giving all French colonies back to India. Now, there were other colonies, like in 1957. This colony was a colony from a Middle Eastern country, Oman. Yes, Oman. Plot twist. You probably were thinking something like a European country, but Oman did actually have a reasonable empire. And although they did lose it to Persia and the UK, they did have one region in Pakistan called Gwadar that still remained. However, Pakistan naturally wanted it just like India wanted all the colonies too. So a treaty was signed in 1958, which gave the land back. The end. In 1961, the final colonies were seized. You see, Portugal had colonies too. In fact, they were the first to colonize parts of India, mainly Goa, which can still be seen in Goan culture, just like in Puducherry culture, you can see an essence of French. However, I've actually made a video about these. I mean, it's not very good of a video, but still you should watch it if you want to learn more. Anyway, what happened was they were less like the French. They really didn't care about India and just wanted to keep their colonies. However, India wasn't very happy about that. And then a fishing boat was accidentally, hit by the Portuguese. So India naturally got their tanks and conquered all the Portuguese colonies in a mere 41 minutes. Then the Indian-Chinese Wars. This would be the official time the Chinese entered the Kashmir conflict. It was not one war but two wars connected into one, as India and China fought over in two areas, Arunachal Pradesh and Atsai Chin. Atsai Chin was the Chinese name for the part of Kashmir they now claimed. Basically, they built a high China, instead of already claiming it, they just built a highway through. Somebody accidentally built a highway through it, and China's like, oh well, I guess I just have to take it. And India did not like that. China invaded anyway to take the land, which India saw as a declaration of war. And then China said, while we're at it, we should take our other claim to land, which was Arunachal Pradesh. Basically, India and Tibet ratified their border with each other. This was one of the few times Tibet and British India actually did anything. But then China came and they said that since they didn't sign any treaty, they're free to bend the treaty to their will. So they said, Arunachal Pradesh is theirs. I'm not citing for anyone, I'm just telling you what China did. Anyway, China stormed the place and took Arunachal Pradesh. In the end of the war, Atsai Chin was half taken. India was able to keep some lands, but India naturally still claimed Aksai Chin, and India was able to take back control of Arunachal Pradesh. In 1971, before there were a few cessions by Pakistan's claims, which India did not accept. But what I really want to talk about is the Pakistani Civil War. Basically, in East Pakistan, people were basically treated as weird figures. People in East Pakistan felt that they were being oppressed by West Pakistan, where the government was. They were basically the factory of Pakistan, making everything. However, they felt they weren't getting enough from the government in return. So they decided to gain independence as Bangladesh. Also, another reason was because they had distinct cultures of Bengal culture, which can also be seen in India, but who cares anymore? Pakistan in return had to get their army to take control. However, the Indian-funded Bangladeshi army was already ready. and defended their land. The Pakistani Civil War soon became the Bangladeshi War of Independence, which Bangladesh obviously won, and Pakistan was driven out of the land. Now at the beginning of the video, I said there were four princely states that decided to stay independent. Now one of these still remains, Sikkim. But why? Well, nobody really cared about Sikkim, did they? Sikkim was Buddhist enough to stay independent, and India and China both respected it. Similarly, Nepal and Bhutan did, although Nepal especially kind of envied it. Anyway, Sikkim was doing good until now, where their economy, I know that's not the currency of any Sikkim or anything, but just chill. Just plummeted all the way down. Sikkim was doing horrible, and they had no choice but to join India because, well, there was nothing else they could do. They joined India as a state so that they could still have some sort of autonomy, losing their independence along the way. This would be the last thing that decided India's and Pakistan's borders, also Bangladesh to a tiny extent. And that's all. All these wars were really doomed to happen because of the ugly way the British set up British India. I'm not advocating for any cause. Once again, I am just telling you what happened. If you like this video, please remember to subscribe, and I will see you again for more map mark. But wait. Have you ever wanted a calendar with signature maps about Native Americans? No? Maybe you do now? Please? 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 Well, get this one. It's completely free and it's just a printout.